All right, good afternoon. I'm Steve Keating, a curriculum advisor with the Western Fire Chiefs Association. I want to welcome you today to the fifth Fire Tech U webinar, and we appreciate you taking the time today to join us. Fire Tech U is created by the Western Fire Chiefs Association with funding from a Google AI collaborative initiative, and its primary goal is to build technological fluency in the fire service. It's done by closing the gaps that inhibit access to innovation and ensure that fire service leaders are equipped today to apply technology with confidence. FireTech-U is helping expand access to solutions that strengthen prevention, preparedness, response, recovery, and day-to-day operations across the fire service. In today's webinar, we're going to be discussing data and technology support. Today's fire departments generate more data than ever before, from CAD to RMS, staffing, training, inspections. Yet far too many organizations lack the capacity to transform that data into actionable insights. The use of fire service data in the fire service doesn't require fire chiefs to become data scientists. It's about cultivating a data-driven culture where data is seen as a valuable tool for decision-making rather than an administrative burden. So we're very fortunate today to be joined by Joanna Zibbell. She's the fire tech manager with the Boise Fire Department, and Jessica LeBlanc with the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue. These two individuals are well-respected leaders in the industry of analytics, and one chairs and one resides as the secretary of the Association of Fire and Emergency Service Analysts. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Joanne to get started. And again, welcome.
Thank you so much. Just going to do a quick screen check. You can see my screen.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate, Jessica and I both really appreciate being asked to participate today to discuss the role of data analysts in fire and emergency services. Move my slide here. So what we're going to cover today is the need for data analysts, key responsibilities, types of analysts, how you might go about justifying the data analyst position, how to best support your analyst, and getting involved with the data analyst community. So before we jump into the content, my colleague Jessica LeBlanc and I are going to quickly introduce ourselves. As you hear our backgrounds, you'll notice that something that's true across the analyst community, which is there's no one single direct path into this work. Across the industry, Jessica and I both see people with a wide range of education and experience and career paths that are really thriving in this role. So for me personally, I am the tech manager at Boise Fire. My degree is actually in environmental economics. I started working for the state environmental agency out of college. I actually worked in outreach and education. I eventually moved over to our groundwater program, and it was very clear that they needed a steward for their databases and their software applications. And so I was able to learn on the job and lean into that role and realizing that I really enjoyed it. So I did some on-the-job training, got a little bit of formal training, and then was able to qualify for a job with the public health laboratory in Idaho. That was a couple months before COVID, so it was a really interesting time to be a data scientist in that space. After I was there for a couple of years, I took the role as the data analyst at Boise Fire, and now I oversee our hardware, software, and data for the organization. I'll let Jessica introduce herself.
Thanks, Joanna. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Again, Jessica LeBlanc, I'm the data analytics lead for the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department in Northern Virginia. This job was not my childhood dream. I kind of always wanted to be a child psychologist. And then I started high school right after The Silence of the Lambs was released. So I transitioned into a child psychologist into a criminal child psychologist, and then decided law school might be cool too. So I went to college, got my degree in psychology and criminology, and then abandoned both of those paths, as well as my thesis about halfway through writing that in grad school. And then I ended up landing a job at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this was before Facebook. So I was an analyst in their exploited child division, kind of digging through email headers and photograph backgrounds and chat room conversations. kind of looking for clues about the identity of potential victims of child exploitation or their offenders. So I would package these cases together if I could figure out where I thought this was occurring. And that's where I learned to speak police. I would have to kind of cold call a police agency and say, hey, I think this is happening, or I think this victim lives in your jurisdiction while you take the case. So I did that for about 14 months. And then I landed a job as a crime analyst with the Fairfax County Police Department. So I did that for 14 years. I supported patrol, investigations, special operations, which was SWAT, K9, crash reconstruction. And about 2 years before I left, just kind of found myself searching for work, searching for purpose. I kind of felt like I'd hit a ceiling of some sorts, just wilting a little bit. And I had worked with the fire department on some pedestrian crash analyses. And so they kind of gave me a heads up that they were hiring a data analyst. So I applied for that, got that job, was terrified because I didn't think you were supposed to cross lines from police to fire, but did that successfully, but promoted twice. So it still feels really new. I've only been in the fire service now for coming up on 8 years, and it still feels kind of brand new every day, but I'm really enjoying this challenge of the steep learning curve. As Stephen mentioned, I am the chair of the Association of Fire and Emergency Services Analysts. I'm a principal on 2 of the NFPA standards related to data and analytics, 1022 and then 950, 951, with the goal of kind of contributing and continuing to learn from the fire service outside of the fire department in Fairfax.
Thank you. We're going to do a quick poll right now, so I'm going to ask Anne to help us launch that. What we want to do is hear from you, hear what the status of your department is when it comes to if you have an analyst, if you want an analyst. If you do have an analyst, are they dedicated full-time or do they have hybrid responsibilities? And then hopefully you'll all see that on your screen now. And then the last question is, what is the biggest barrier to having an analyst? And this is information we're going to dive into. We'll show you the results here at the end of this presentation. So take your time answering those questions. I'll progress my slide here. So before we talk about the role of data analysts, I wanted to kind of ground this in the reality I think fire chiefs are dealing with right now. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments if what I'm saying is tracking with you. So we all experience calls rising and then those calls drawing more attention from the public, city council, other leadership. Basically, people know that data exists and their expectation is that we should be able to quickly answer their questions and provide that information. At the same time, chiefs are being asked to justify decisions with evidence, not anecdotes. So not a gut feeling, not we feel busy, but here's what's happening, here's the trend, here's the risk, and here's the impact. In Idaho in particular, we have a House Bill 304, which reduces property tax capacity for local taxing districts. And our chief has been making a point to mention this as much as he can to the line and to other members of the department, that he needs to be able to tell our story, and he can't do that without consistent and better data. So he can more clearly demonstrate the need and effectively compete for these limited funding resources. And additionally, departments continue to invest in technology, but just buying technology doesn't automatically create value. Ultimately, data does exist everywhere. We have a lot of different systems, as Steve mentioned, but insights do not automatically. So data is everywhere. Insights are not. This is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in the modern fire service, and honestly, probably a lot of industries. Fire departments generate data across many systems. We automatically think about incident data, but really, we have data in a lot of places: staffing, prevention, finance, asset management, and those systems were just simply not designed to work together. Data exists in different formats and can have separate definitions even for the same field. So what happens is, and I'm sure you all experience this, is leaders end up seeing fragments, but not the full picture of what's happening in their department or their community. And this is where analysts can become essential. We can help connect the dots, validate the data, translate it, and ultimately we have the skill sets to help you tell that story. So as I mentioned, technology does not automatically equal outcomes. Departments, and maybe your department is experiencing this, in general, we're all investing in new software all the time. There's always a new shiny object. Maybe it's really amazing. Maybe it's going to miss the mark. But investing in software alone isn't a bad thing. But what we see is that departments buy tools and then still struggle to actually get value of them. So that's where an analyst can come in. They can help you determine, first of all, if you can self-solve using existing platforms rather than investing in new redundant solutions. They can connect data across systems, translate it into staffing models, performance measures, risk dashboards, budget justifications, or operational strategy. So software is powerful, but really only when it's paired with the right human to interpret and operationalize those results. So to us, the ideal state isn't tools or people, it's analysts paired with effective tools. So I'll pass it over to you, Jessica.
So let's talk about a few of the different types of analysts. We have business, GIS, and data. Data analyst roles kind of complement emergency services by focusing on process optimization, spatial analysis, data trend analysis, and contributing those unique insights that Joanna was just talking about. Conversation that we have frequently in Fairfax is it easier to train a quick-acting firefighter to be a full-service analyst? Or is it easier to teach an analyst the culture, the vernacular mission of the fire service in a way that informs their natural propensity for critical thinking? Certainly both are possible, but we'll come back to this question a little bit later once we talk for a bit about the types of analysts that thrive and support the fire service. See it, right? There we go. So this is the org chart that existed in Fairfax County when I arrived. When you consider the role of an analyst in your organization, it naturally makes sense to place them in the org chart beneath the command structure that's in a position to best support them and with their most frequent or dependent customers in mind. So can an analyst support the training academy? 100%. Will the training academy consume the bulk of their working hours? Probably not. So it may not make sense to place them in the same chain of command as the training academy staff. So when I was hired, in Fairfax County in 2018, I was a data analyst 1 with the working title of operations data analyst. So that purple rectangle with the yellow dash border. So I was working underneath operations. We had analysts all over the place, EMS, IT, health and wellness, and then there's me out on the ops hallway, not talking to anybody because I was back on the ops hallway. Chief Butler realized that this org chart was really kind of handicapping the analytical function of the agency. So he changed it. And in 2020, right before COVID started, he centralized all the analysts into one division and hired a civilian manager that reports directly to his XO. So you'll see that our division now is equal to the IT division. The partnership between those two divisions is critical. The data analysts support GIS analysts by curating and accessing the operational data that they need. The GIS analysts are the stewards of the spatial data and the tools that the data analysts use to conduct analysis. All of the analysts are cross-trained. We're generalists. So whoever wins the lottery first and pops smoke, our cross-training will allow the division to keep moving forward without skipping a beat. There are no single points of failure in our org chart and in our training design right now. The QR code that you see there on the bottom right is just a link to the Fairfax County's data analyst job classifications. So let's talk a little bit about specific types of analysts. So you have business analysts. They examine workflows and resource use to streamline operations and improve efficiency within their organization. They help you do more with less. They understand dependencies, downstream effects of process and procedural changes, and they can anticipate and mitigate the impact of those changes. So they know that when you finish that reorg and your 24-hour rescue drops to a peak hour rescue, they're going to have a new unit ID. And that unit ID needs to be included in any processes, data tables, analyses that look specifically at rescue units as a whole before the change is live. They know that not everything needs to have a wet signature. Maybe an email or a digital signature will suffice. Not everything needs to be printed. They can help reduce information fatigue. So not every change needs to route through 5 people for approval. Maybe 4 notifications and 1 approval are sufficient. So how much time is saved when 4 fewer people have to touch and approve a provider's request to drop their ALS status, especially when that employee under most circumstances can't be compelled to maintain that status. So when you're waiting on people to return from vacation or get around to their inbox, waiting on those approvals can take a long time and they may not be necessary. Business analysts can save enormous amounts of time on manual and repetitive processes by recommending improvements to the workflow and eliminating single points of failure. So later we'll showcase some free and low-cost tools to help automate those repetitive processes. Next, we're going to talk about GIS analysts. So they create detailed maps that visualize incident locations, resource distribution, high-risk areas to support strategic planning. The picture speaks 1,000 words. We've heard it a million times. The map on your screen is just a list of places. It's information that could just as easily be provided in an Excel workbook with one row for every incident, but it's infinitely easier for us to digest as a picture. And it can be live. This can change in real time as your responses do. GIS analysts are stewards of the spatial data that fire departments depend on every day, whether it's station locations that inform your resource allocation, maybe you're looking at temp firehouses or new builds, hydrant locations, and that status that kind of informs your water supply plan at the next fire, or the roadway network that determines how CAD will recommend and route units to your next call. We also have paper street drills that are dependent on GIS, and if they're digitized, makes those pre-planning incident drills much more efficient, leaving a lot more time for additional reps on safety and technique. GIS analysts can also help the public understand the trends and the challenges, the demands that your agency handles. Through applications like Adopt a Hydrant and incident dashboards, the public can stay up to speed on what's happening in the community and even participate in making it safer by taking ownership over and reporting hydrant issues, roadway access issues, and changes in building access and management. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about data analysts. We use words like uptick, trend, increase as if they're synonymous, and they're not. Patterns or cycles are repetitive observations over time. Summers are warmer than winters. There's more calls in densely populated areas than rural areas. Trends are new observations that may or may not be related to a pattern. Attrition spiked 2 years ago, but now it's settled down, and you realize that's because a neighboring jurisdiction moved to a more desirable work schedule, and all the new kids transferred while the tenured people stayed in place. Data analysts have the expertise to know when a change is significant. Is something doubling or having a reason to panic or to act? If it's dropping from 50 paramedics to 25, probably. If it's responding to 3 bee stings last year and 6 bee stings this year, no. So the law of large numbers is a real thing. Lying with statistics is a real thing. And a data analyst can help protect you from the consequences of faulty assumptions and leading figures. Data analysts and data scientists can model data in ways that optimize it for analysis. They can leverage or build models that predict the next thing or place or time and test it against what actually occurred, just like training. The process refines the model and increases its success and reliability when you deploy it. And it can inform everything from where you stage a chainsaw and plow units at the next winter storm to alerting you when a provider is administering a medication at much higher rates than you would expect. So analysts as human capital can grow and adapt over time to the available resources of your department, to shifts in community composition and land use, to changes in your response plan. Technology and specifically analytical tools are often not as flexible or transparent, and they can't adapt as quickly to your organizational change, certainly not at a cost. Technology is a tool that analysts use to accomplish tasks frequently, to share results responsibly, and to quickly explore data for both expected and unexpected patterns. However, without that human to interpret the technology's output and attest to the reliability and validity of the data, the analysis will be incomplete at best and lead to faulty recommendations at worst, which really increases risk and causes harm. So the analyst is really your interpreter between the technology and the fire service. I'll tell a quick story to kind of tie all of this stuff together. What we're looking at here is Fairfax County's Battalion 1. Station 25 is going to be our focus. The star is a hospital. So the problem that came to our unit was we don't have enough paramedics. We got to convert some of these medic transports down to ambulances. So the question that was asked was, which first dues have the fewest patient encounters receiving an ALS level of care? The question behind the question was, which 4 medics do I convert to ambulances? So without that question behind the question, the solution was we're just going to convert the transport units with in the first dues with the fewest ALS procedures and medications. So when mistakes are made, the analyst can help you pivot and advise you on how to do that in a way that makes changes measurable and reliable. So February 2022, we convert Medic 25 to Ambulance 25, and immediately Station 25 is sounding the alarm, panicking, complaining, they're up all night, runs are out of control. So in April, the deputy chief of EMS says, I need to look at dispatch versus level of care. So this report, very boring to read, but the question behind the question is our dispatch algorithm sending the appropriate resources to these calls? And that highlighted number at the top basically tells you 65% of our dispatches are going out as ALS calls, but only 17% of those calls are actually receiving an ALS level of care. So what we did was a full analysis. This just shows you that those units surrounding Station 25 did in fact see a very dramatic increase during the daytime and nighttime hours, those medic units. And this shows you kind of the same information when in color. So on the left side, you're seeing before, and the right side, you're seeing after, and you can see their busyness is very obvious after this ambulance, or after Medic 25 was converted back to an ambulance. So what we also discovered was the engine at Station 25, which carries a paramedic, went from like top 10 engines running paramedic calls to top 3. So just converting that one unit was running 6 or 7 other units ragged. So immediately we took those 2 ambulances and converted them back to medics. A total of 12 were converted overall. Over time, we changed our dispatch algorithm. So we now have 3 levels of EMS, not 2. And this chart just shows you our call processing time. So the Alpha and the Bravo are the most critical, and those call processing times are lower than the Charlie calls, which is what we wanted. So the result here is shorter call processing times when it matters. And then we demonstrated by being able to flex, we listened to the field, we heard their complaints, we did the analysis to make sure that we had the data to validate it, and we made a pivot. We pivoted very quickly, which demonstrates transparency to the field and flexibility. So that kind of that improved their buy-in and their morale. Key responsibilities. Let me go back to that page really quick. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some basic things that an analyst would want to do. We are the storytellers. We write the narrative that you deliver to the Board of Supervisors, the mayor, the city council. They provide decision support and help solve problems. It's much more than just answering questions. So we're using data, experience, collaboration to tell a story in a meaningful way to a specific audience for a specific purpose. So here's a few operational things that an analyst truly does. So in terms of translating raw data, right? Response times at Station 7 are way higher than any other station. Okay, the story behind the story there is the design is really different. The bunks at that station are upstairs and on the opposite side of the building from the bays, so their turnout times are longer. Maybe they're making 3 left turns before they get to a highway, so their travel time is longer. In supporting strategic planning, data analysis for community risk assessments, budget discussions, program appraisals, accreditations, certifications, compliance requirements. Helping with those decisions, data analysts can provide the asterisk on that recommendation and how the results of that analysis might change if the assumptions change or if they're wrong to begin with, which is what we saw with the transport unit conversions we just talked about. So this analysis, for example, assumes that all mutual aid agreements remain in place and unchanged over time. If Agency X moves their ALS units farther west, our responses to their jurisdiction are going to go up, which means our availability in our own jurisdiction goes down. So you have the narrative part to fill in those numbers that you're used to seeing. Quality of data, suggesting things like supplemental questions in your forms to support special programs and their effectiveness, like technical rescue. Implementing visibility rules and validation rules on those forms to ensure that they're as painless as possible for the field to complete. If it's easy and intuitive for the field to complete the report, complete the form, they're much more likely to do it correctly and give you really good data to work with. And analysts can educate the field on the correct way to do those through ride-alongs, did you know documents. We're always on the lookout for new sources of data and how we can integrate those with existing data. In Fairfax, we store weather data from 3 different airports. It's public, it's open source data. We just scrape it from the internet and we store it so that we know in advance of severe weather, we can go back and look at weather on dates that were similar and look at the calls on those days to kind of predict what we can expect our call volume to look like or where we can expect it to increase. We can integrate data like ABL data with EPCR data to determine if the transport destination on the EPCR matches the unit's ABL location, and that helps improve things like billing accuracy. And improving those processes and workflows is something that I am very passionate about. No more paper forms or fillable PDFs and Excel workbooks on people's desktops. That's a black hole where data goes to die, and you miss the opportunity to learn from it. So analysts can help you automate those manual and repetitive tasks, which give humans their time back to do things that computers cannot do, like develop training plans, write grants, do those extra training reps. And so then you're going to improve the quality and the speed of the data and the audience that it reaches, which is ultimately going to be saving money. So here's a few examples. Did I skip too fast? Examples of analysis, we'll go into some case studies here pretty soon, but these are just an appetizer of the full menu that an analyst can curate. This is what's possible. Some of it you can build tomorrow, some of it might take you weeks, but it'll save you months of a human's time down the road. So they allow you to really begin to understand and contextualize a problem, a trend, a pattern, and in many cases, it's an interactive way that allows you to drill down much deeper into the data than what you were presented at first glance.
Thanks, Jessica. I wanted to infuse here too that Fairfax County is well known as the gold star for analytics. So the org chart that Jessica shared, I will say that Boise Fire has 1.5 analysts, and that the robust amount of analytics that they do, we do similar things here at Boise, but not as comprehensively because we just simply don't have the people. So it's always aspirational to hear what Fairfax County is doing to set goals for yourself of, where your program can move. So we're going to talk briefly about skills needed for the job. So first, analysts have to be able to connect and manage data across systems. As Jessica mentioned, there's a lot of data available, and to bring that together takes a specific skill set. In most departments, those systems don't naturally talk to each other, as I'm sure you're very familiar. So a big part of the job is cleaning, validating, and creating something reliable to work from. It's very important that analysts understand the business, as Jessica mentioned, the workflows, and have a basic understanding of the systems collecting the data. If your analyst has never seen the front end of your RMS, that's a problem. They need to understand how the operations that generate the data and how people are actually entering the data into those systems. The second skill set is critical thinking. So it's not just about pulling numbers, as Jessica mentioned, it's asking the right questions, identifying those patterns and risk, testing assumptions, and making sure we don't accidentally tell the wrong story with data, which is, that's where that peer review becomes very important, or that we use data to tell the story we want to tell, which I don't think anybody does on purpose, but it is helpful when your assumption does match what the data is showing. Analysts need to be inquisitive and collaborative, and this is particularly, as I mentioned, in departments where there's only one analyst, which is actually quite common. So if that's the case, they really need to build in a peer review process with the business. So with prevention, with ops, with special ops, to make sure that their approach and results are accurate. Third thing is the tool set. Analysts need a working knowledge of programming languages, GIS, dashboards, automation tools, and reporting tools. Ad hoc analysis is always going to be part of the analyst's role, but the goal is really to build repeatable systems that turn data into self-service for the department. I will say that it's difficult to find someone who speaks all of the languages in analytics. Then that's okay. That's expected. For example, we hired an analyst here, and he had strong skills in Power BI and Python, less in GIS, right? But he's able to come in, learn on the job. So I'd say to get all of those is a unicorn and probably not possible. Fourth, and honestly, this is probably one of the most important, is communication. So the value of analysis isn't in the spreadsheet itself, it's in the ability to translate complex work into clear, actionable information for leadership. So for example, this comes up time and time again, 90th percentiles. are really not that intuitive for people in my experience. They'd much prefer to discuss in averages, but they are the standard for performance in the industry. So we have to, and there are reasons why we use 90th percentiles. So we have to be able to articulate that to leaders so they can understand where we sit in terms of our goals. And finally, integrity and judgment. Analysts will have access to sensitive data, and the credibility of the organization depends on transparent methods, documented assumptions, and results that ultimately hold up. So in the next few slides, we're going to showcase a series of case studies, mostly through dashboards, but I want to emphasize that each dashboard represents real work that was built in response to an operational need, whether that's a recurring workflow, a pilot project, a leadership request, or an ad hoc question that just kept coming up. So what's important is that the dashboard's not the end product, it's the delivery mechanism. Behind every dashboard is a process. So data extraction, validation, ongoing quality control. These are the things analysts and your technical staff manage every day to make this information reliable and usable. So ultimately, a goal for every analyst should be to move as much of that reporting into self-service as possible. So when users ask questions, they can answer them on their own, and analysts' time can be freed up to focus on higher value work, that deeper analysis, trend detection, forecasting, and stuff that actually requires their expertise. So I'll start with incident dashboards, because I think that's where all of our brains go when we think of analytics and dashboards. On the left side, you'll see there's various incident response dashboards from Boise Fire. They're pretty standard. I will mention our senior living communities dashboard. It provides insight to the demand coming from that sector, as well as how effective our outreach efforts have been to educate them on when to call 911 and the importance of being properly staffed. You'll also see a screenshot here of Dark Horse Analytics, which we subscribe to. This is the software plus human approach. We make this tool available to everyone in our organization. They're able to log in and dive into the data. It does have great reporting tools, but we also use it for their deployment module, which we have limitations within our department to start looking at where should we put the next station location? Where should we put this resource? We see value in subbing that out and saving our skill set for other things. Jessica, I'll let you talk about your examples.
Thanks. Thanks, Joanna. So just a couple of examples from Fairfax. This is our personnel dispatch history. It started off as a curiosity request. Firefighter from the field just wanted to know how many calls he'd run in his career. And so we just decided, I'm not going to answer this 1,400 times, because as soon as he tells the field, hey, I got this information, the other 1,399 firefighters in Fairfax are going to want the same thing. So we just plopped it into Power BI. And what this ended up doing was really exploding the buy-in from the field on the fact that A, we have data, B, we can make it accessible, and C, we can tell stories with it. So this is all CAD data. It's not integrated with anything other than CAD, but what it does is give folks a picture of when they were busy, what they were writing. The gray, black, blue, and yellow pie chart starts conversations about sleep deprivation, how frequently you're waking up in the middle of the night. So this also became kind of a fun competition tool, because everyone was comparing their runs to other people in the agency. This is our extrication dashboard. So we've added a couple of questions when we go on a vehicle extrication. It helps inform things like resource allocation in terms of, do we repair and replace equipment, what kind of training we should do on tools that we don't use frequently, and whether our dispatch algorithm, again, are we dispatching the right resources to those calls quickly. And then last, we have a mutual aid summary. This kind of informs agreements with our partners, quick pulse check of the impact when they move their units around or put them out of service. It's easy for us to see what the impact is on our units in terms of demand.
Okay, next I grabbed some screenshots of departments with public-facing dashboards. So Boise Fire does have one. We have a report to the community we update annually, but authoring public-facing dashboards is a great way to empower the public and reduce PRRs. Go ahead, Jessica.
This is one of our grant dashboards. Again, I don't want to have to run this data every single year. So what I've done is built this dashboard. Whoever is submitting the grant chooses the calendar year, and the data is right there for them. This is our first due activity. Our PIO office uses this when they go out on station visits, when the fire chief is visiting different stations in the community, gives them a quick hit version of what's going on in that community in terms of fire and EMS, the biggest, most critical calls. And this is our community risk assessment. We built this for the first time 2022. And it allowed us to take our 500 plus page standards of cover down to this one Power BI report and a 26-page PDF document on our website. This Power BI report is public. Anybody can go here and look at their community, determine what the target hazards are, what our responses in that community look like, what the demographics of that community look like, and that QR code will take you straight to that if you're interested in looking.
Okay, so on to surveys. So Boise Fire has an ongoing community survey and once a year an employee survey. As I mentioned, with 1.5 analysts on staff, it's really critical that we put some of that insight responsibility into our staff here. So we self-serve this, we serve this data up to leadership so they can, alongside with us, look into insights.
We also use Survey 1 to 3 to collect data that we can't get natively from the data sets of NERIS and NEMSIS. So then we leverage some low code, no code automation tools to trigger notifications to different agencies with different resources to assist with issues related to adult and child protective services, code violations. These emails automatically go out and they replace the need for a firefighter to pick up the phone, fill out a different form, send their own email, and it automatically includes all the data that they've collected in this tool. We also use that spatially, and this kind of informs our CRR team, who frequently review locations of our smoke alarm installations to identify high-risk communities that may not have any documented installations. And they can also use this as a tool to narrate when lives are saved because occupants were alerted by a smoke detector that we installed.
So staffing, I think optimal staffing and effective leave management are probably two of the biggest operational challenges fire departments face. So are we staffed at the right levels? Are there patterns in leave usage that create strain on certain shifts or stations? Are we using overtime in the most efficient way? And are policies being applied consistently and fairly? So here are two examples from Boise Fire. An important note to mention here is this is where we start to get into sensitive information that directly impacts people and morale. So I wanted to emphasize again that analysts need to be trustworthy and critical thinkers. If analysts are responsible for pulling data to inform sick leave usage, it needs to be sound. Go to the next. Quality assurance, I'll hand this one off to Jessica because at Boise Fire, all our medic partners handle all of the QA, QC for our EPCRs, and we aspire to do more QA, QC for NERIS.
So this is an example of one of our dashboards for STEMI patients. It allows us to kind of pulse check how frequently we alert the hospital that we're coming to them with a STEMI patient, which obviously we want to get that correct as much as we can because we don't want to over triage and have the hospitals question whether or not we're bringing a critical patient to them. We don't want to under triage. We want to make sure the hospital is ready for us when we get there with this critical patient. Joanna, it is not letting, there we go. Penetrating trauma, we do a CQI sprint every 2 months. So every 2 months we focus on a different patient population. This one happens to be penetrating trauma. Just kind of summarizes the data that's on the EPCR along with the CQI points that the reviewer looked at. We've got some slicers there at the top so you can kind of drill down by a demographic or a medication or a procedure that you're particularly interested in. This is our box alarm dashboard. We call it Fire QA. We built it in-house before NERIS existed. So it does include some data points that are now native to the NERIS data set. Our safety officer does go around, collect some information after all of our working fires. This is available to everybody in the fire department. So that drop down at the top just gives you the incident number and the address, and everybody can open this up and kind of tailboard or review later at shift what happened, even if they weren't on this call. So you can see we've got links to the audio recordings. There's photographs that were taken at the scene. We've got some timestamps about water on fire, laps, hoses that were pulled, arrival and dispatch order. So it gives a pretty good summary of operationally what we did on the fire. And we also have a summary page. Please go back. That summarizes all the data for these working fires. It's not intended to be punitive. You can't really drill down to a unit or to a station, but it gives us an idea of what we're doing well and what we might need to train on. So for example, we only give this command statement 37% of the time. Why? Is this because we don't need to give that command statement, so we don't, and maybe we remove that from the requirements? Or is it something that we really need to do and train on because we're not doing it successfully? So this is something that we can look at system-wide.
I'm going to do a little time check, Jessica, so I'm going to cruise through these next couple ones.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention public records requests are a great opportunity to get data out there and take the pressure off the data analysts so they can do more deep dives. Jessica, these were your compliance slides.
Yep, we have a couple of compliance dashboards that we share with agencies outside of the fire department. So what we have here is an elevator dashboard, hazardous materials release, and false alarms. So we share these with agencies outside of the fire department. They have different resources and different reporting requirements. So when we make the data available to them, they don't have to come and ask me for it. They can retrieve it for themselves.
And the last subject we'll just mention real quickly, at Boise Fire, we're in a really strong position because of our ArcGIS Online ecosystems. So not just for mapping, but ArcGIS Online has a ton of workflow automation, data collection, and storytelling tools. So we've been able to improve our pre-plan, after action review, acquired structure, and home safety assessment programs.
And we've got a pretty robust GIS section as well, as we talked about earlier. This is our vehicle preemption dashboard. It allows us to track all of the traffic signals in the county that have the vehicle preemption technology. We can track it by who's funding it, what its status is, and this is immediately available. This is what we call Rescue Vision. We built this again in-house. It enabled us to replace an entire software program. So it shows us coverage just in drive time right now. So at any point in time, you can see what gaps exist in the county in terms of our ability to respond with engine truck rescue. The blue column there is showing you CAD discrepancies. So, hey, this engine is signed on as a medic, but there's not a paramedic rostered to it. We need to fix that. The orange column gives you some information about units that are out of service for a long particular time. And these are up on TVs at our dispatch center. So the uniformed fire officer is constantly monitoring these to see if there are going to be extended gaps in coverage. They can use it to move units into areas of the county that might need coverage while there's something extended going on. All right, so justifying the data analyst position. This is an important part because if you don't have a data analyst and you want one, this is an important part of the tool because everyone's fighting for money, right? So you're going to have to, just like you would have to justify the cost of a new technology or tool, you're going to have to prepare a rock solid justification for an analyst. So let's go back to that question I asked earlier. Is it better to train a firefighter to be an analyst, or is it better to train an analyst to learn the fire service? So skill sets are totally different. The only overlap really is the workspace, which is fire and emergency services. So are there unicorns who can do both? Absolutely. We have at least one of those in Fairfax. My boss is a volunteer firefighter. He's been doing that for almost 30 years, and he's also a technological wizard. So that's why the fire chief recruited him to lead our division. We have a lot of very brilliant firefighters who come and work for our division or work for us on light duty, who do understand analytics and can do both jobs. It's very, very rare. So when push comes to shove, you more often get the bang for your buck when you're teaching someone who's an inherent overthinker and prone to nitpicking things like word choice. To learn the fire service, then you are to teach someone who's inherently a tactical problem solver to slow down and care about the ramifications of storing a date as a text string rather than a date. So this is not to say that promoting from within is a non-starter. It just means that you should not assume that a passion and familiarity with the fire service makes someone a natural analyst. In fact, the caution here is that someone who's wrapping up a 30-year career and looking for a soft landing and retirement may not be curious about the fire service at all. They've done it for decades. And if you're not starting with curiosity and a comfort with asking why, then you're starting off on the wrong foot. So the good news is you don't have to start from scratch. We're going to talk about some resources that are available to help you articulate the need in an impactful way and write that job description to hire someone who is well qualified to do the job. A couple of measurable things that you can talk about. Investment in analysts can improve efficiency, streamline repetitive tasks, and improve service delivery through context and prioritization. So analysts help color in between the lines. So we see that data alone, we have this picture of a tree, and we know that it's a tree. When you bring a data analyst in to have them color in between the lines and tell the story, you get the background, you get the weather, you get the color, you kind of see some movement, and it tells a much different story, a much more complete story than the data alone. So there's a few examples here on the screen of outcomes related to quality analysis and measurable impact. Response times are always something that people are looking to improve. So data analysts can provide you impact with explaining things like, hey, slow stations may have poor Wi-Fi when you leave the station. So their connectivity drops, the timestamp doesn't record, and so their accuracy may not be good. So when you repair or improve the coverage of the Wi-Fi, timestamp accuracy improves. Lo and behold, the response times are getting better. Same thing with call processing, right? Improving those dispatch algorithms to align with a new resource deployment plan would be important. Always looking to reduce overtime. Analysts can help you do things like identify supply hoarding, find stations that might have an abundance of expired medications, tracking that stuff and reducing the waste, which reduces cost. We talked about the community risk and the smoke detectors things already. ISO ratings make everybody happy. When those go lower, so do the insurance rates for your residents, which makes the local government and decision makers very happy. And you've got this organizational efficiency again, which is near and dear to my heart. Streamlining those workflows to provide feedback quickly to the field can really improve their morale and improves patient care. And things like filling in those forms quickly, automating notifications so that firefighters aren't having to do extra work really improves their morale, and honestly, it improves their compliance with policy. I'm going to skip through this. If you guys want to talk about EMS CQI, please grab my contact information at the end of the presentation, reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about that. But in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we have time to answer questions at the end. So I'm going to skip straight to 1022. This defines the minimum job requirements for a fire and emergency services analyst, and it ensures those standardized qualifications and performance. So this was first drafted in April 2024, so it's pretty new. It took about 5 years. I was a work group participant in several chapters of this first version, and then was appointed principal for the next cycle, which should be in 2027. Just as there's standardized JPRs for things like technical rescue and hazmat competencies, we have the same things for analysts, because we want to make sure that we're all beginning from the same baseline, standardized in our methodologies, and operating under clear and consistent expectations. So as we've discussed the differences between data analysts, GIS analysts, and business analysts today, 1022 defines those very specific roles, as well as the role of a data analytics manager. We haven't talked much about career pathways for the analysts today, but that's always something to consider during conversations about retention and scale. 1022 is an excellent resource in writing the fire and emergency services analyst job description, and it offers that industry standard that you can lean on when you're justifying the need for this position to your agency or to your board or to your council. I'm aware of at least one analyst who completely rewrote their job description after this was published, and it was successfully adopted.
Okay, awesome. So how do we ensure analysts are set up to maximize their impact to the organization? So first, analysts succeed when leadership actually uses the data and not just as an afterthought for annual reports. So I think Jessica's given some amazing examples of how that data is not just retrospective. It can actually inform operational decisions today. If data is part of how decisions get made, analysts immediately become more valuable and invested in the organization. Second, the data has to be trusted. If the department doesn't believe the data, or the data is inconsistent across systems, what the analyst ends up doing is spending all of their time defending numbers instead of producing insight. So this goes back to a larger conversation about access to data and vendor lock-in in the fire industry. If anyone's going to be at Ignite in Vegas in March, we'll be having a dedicated session on this topic. But that topic is near and dear to my heart and every analyst's heart in terms of access to data and ease of getting to that analysis part, right? The next thing is analysts need effective tools. So if analysts are working exclusively out of spreadsheets, it limits what they can deliver and honestly their professional growth. I have been there, and I will say it's soul crushing. Oops. Sorry about that. Here we go. One of the biggest barriers to analyst success is is related is manual work. So those repetitive low value tasks like downloading data from vendor portals, reformatting spreadsheets, and cleaning the same fields over and over. In my opinion, we run the risk of driving talented individuals away or not hiring the best talent when this is the case. So this is a larger, like broader fire service problem, but this gets back to making good contracts with vendors. So a lot of times we get locked into RMS vendors or other vendors. And when you do have the opportunity to select a new vendor, the message now is that has to be part of the contract. How are you going to get your data? In what format are you going to get your data? And how will the vendor be able to use that data? I came to Boise Fire. This was my first experience with data in the cloud and SaaS tools. And now if I go to my next job interview, that is 100% something I'm going to be asking is what is the status of your data? And that would very honestly would dictate if I got a job offer, if I would accept that job offer based on their data maturity. Analysts also succeed when they're embedded in operations, as Jessica mentioned. So right along station visits, training observations are all great. This is where analysts learn context, build relationships, and start asking better questions. They can easily get overwhelmed with requests, so they may need help prioritizing their work. But generally speaking, I don't like to say, I like people to go straight to the analyst because a conversation with a captain at Station 1 is really informative, and they might have a problem or need help with a solution that other people are experiencing. So it's a fine line, but it's very nice to have that analyst available to all levels of the organization. And finally, analysts need opportunities to learn, to network, to keep their skills current, which leads me to how you can engage with the analyst community.
So lots of different ways. We'll talk about a few here on this next slide. There's organizations, and you have a lot of training. So we have a few here with membership. So the AFESA, I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. You have FireDog, Geospatial, NAPSIG, a couple of training conferences. I've been to a lot of these. I've been to the Excellence Conference, TSI, FRI, Metro Fire Planners. So a lot of great training, great conferences. I will say none are dedicated to data analytics, but all of them have space for data analysts there, which is really nice. AFESA, the Association of Fire and Emergency Services Analysts. So here with the goal to champion the profession of fire and emergency services analysts to drive individual growth, organizational excellence, and industry advancement. So AFESA was launched in March of 2024, incubated by the Center for Public Safety Excellence for the first 3 years, which is generous and amazing. So we launched in 2025, membership opened in July of 2025. We're up to 220 members in 32 states, 2 countries, just shy of 1,600 LinkedIn followers. We have 6 subcommittees that are doing amazing work in education, ethics, membership, nominating, outreach, and research. We have 3 different membership levels, full, associate, and student. So if you're interested, I highly encourage you to check that out. It's a great opportunity to get involved in advocacy, education, innovation, and networking in fire and emergency services.
Real quick, I just wanted to plug some of the things we do with AFESA. Every month we have a solutions cafe, which is just an open, no topic. We let people bring up their problems, what they'd like to discuss, and basically crowdsource. We've also on our second AFESA webinar, the first one was on evaluating EMD efficiency in a tiered EMS system. All these recordings are available if you were to join AFESA after the fact. And then dovetails nicely with this, we're coming up on February 18th. There's a webinar on how to write a job description using NFPA 1022. So with a little bit of time left, I wanted to wrap up and bring this back to the core message of today. I really hope we've demonstrated that analysts are indispensable to fire and emergency services. If you're a leader in this room, I'm sure you agree the question isn't whether your department has data, you do. The question is whether you have the people and the structure to turn that data into decisions and insights. When you invest in an analyst role, you're investing in better outcomes and a stronger, more resilient fire service. I will ask Anne if you could, if it's possible, to display those results. So that's really interesting. I hope you all can see the screen that shows, do you have an analyst? 46% do, 54% don't. Do you want an analyst? 83% said yes, 18 do not. Full-time, we have about 46% are full-time, 54% hybrid. And then the last question, I'll be interested to get that. I can't see that now. I think it's just a open text from you guys, so that'd be interesting to summarize and report out. On the screen now is Jessica and Mai's contact information. Feel free to follow up with either one of us. And then I'll hand it over to Steve if there are any questions.
Yeah, again, thanks. Thanks for the great amount of information today. And there was a request for maybe sharing the PowerPoint. I'll leave that up to the both of you. And thank you very much for sharing both of your contact information there for everybody to follow up if necessary. Somebody's asking for the survey results if they don't mind pushing, if we can push that up again. I think maybe he minimized it and we'll share again. We'll try to get that over to you. But insofar as questions following up, now's a good time. We have just a few minutes left if anybody has any questions. I know a few of them showed up on the chat. And one of the questions was asking if either of your agencies share weather-related calls of service to the National Weather Service, and if so, in real time or after. Can either of you answer that?
We do not share back to the Weather Service, but we do scrape all of their data from the 3 airports nearby to inform our response plan when we have weather that we know is coming up.
All right. Great. I think on one of the other Q&As that came in, asking about any returns to nearest, which is, I think, another reporting. I don't know if either of you are familiar with that.
What was the question?
It was a question of there's any early returns on nearest.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one benefit of NARIS is that you should all have access to your agency node, basically. And within NARIS, they do have dashboards available to you. So that's going to really help those departments that don't have an analyst. You'll get some visibility to your data, which you didn't have before. For us personally, we've just finished landing our data, so we can start to write our reports to it. And so we haven't done a ton of reporting yet, but there's a lot of, I'm very excited about the new fields that are in there. Even something as simple as, were there any animals rescues, right? That's such an anecdote for a lot of fire departments. What if we could actually report a solid number on that? So that's a pretty low stakes, but that just speaks to the better information we have in there. Jessica, have you guys actually done any reporting or analytics yet?
I wouldn't say that we've done specific analytics. We are still kind of in the process of crosswalking all of our reports and processes from the NFIRS to the nearest data set. We're close there, though. We have obviously a huge agency. Our reporting form is immensely customized, so still doing a lot of tweaks there. And yeah, I would say it's in progress.
Yeah, we're 5 or 6 weeks in officially. And I will say that on our Solutions Cafes every month, we often have representation from NARIS there to answer questions. So that's been really helpful to kind of come together and ask and answer those questions.
Fantastic. So we have about a minute for any other questions out there, if anybody may have some. One coming in from Kimberly is asking, would data analysts be beneficial in the training division? That might go without saying, but go ahead.
I will say I have worked with the training division, from everything from going out and giving them a better tool to kind of record the training and the data that's being collected as it happens so that they can see it immediately when they get back into the training academy, to developing t-shirt surveys to give out to the field. We certainly help out with MSEP and ORS in terms of kind of informing what their training topics are going to be based on what we're seeing trending wise in the data. So absolutely an analyst would be beneficial to the training academy.
Yeah, and the training department is a right place for collecting more data. There's not always a standard system for, like, for example, they're going to be testing out, Boise Fire, they're going to be testing out some new products, right? And so they want to be able to give that feedback. And they're a great opportunity for automation and improving workflows.
It's a great opportunity to get in front of the firefighters before they even hit the street and explain to them how you use data and why it's important before they even get out there and start writing reports.
All right. Well, fantastic. Joanne, Jessica, thanks so much for your time today out of your busy schedules. We appreciate your time. And please, if you haven't already, take a moment, go out to the FireTechU website, sign up for any email notifications to stay in the loop for any other technological education opportunities that we have coming up. Thanks again.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having us.
Thank you both.